In the previous episode, once Prince Roland's nuke drop from the sky was successful, he confidently declared that Operation Eastern Wind 001 is ready. Later, he gathers all the witches in the hall, and, after laying out a map of the entire territory, announces that Eastern Wind 001 will commence the next day, and that everyone present will be participating. He then turns to Iron Axe and assigns him the task of taking 50 men to escort the witches to the outskirts of Silver City. He explains that there is a mountainous area there, hidden from view, which is perfect for setting up camp and launching the hot air balloon. Iron Axe quickly agrees to take command, while Wendy asks the prince if they are not flying from the border town. The prince replies that covering such a long distance with the balloon would not be feasible. He then points to the map, which I can't quite understand since the markers aren't in English. But he explains that if they set off from Silver City, they can cover the entire distance in one day and even return by sundown. He then turns to the other witches and calls out the names of witches involved in this mission. The names are as follows: Anna, Wendy, Lightning, Maggie, Nightingale, and Sylvie, who will be participating in the mission. He assigns Nightingale and Sylvie the task of monitoring the camp, while the attack will be conducted by the other 4 witches. The prince further tells them that lightning will be key to the operation, so she better prepare herself as well. Our adventurous girl quickly flashes a big grin, assuring the prince not to worry about the task. Lastly, the prince wraps up the conference by asking everyone to be mindful of their safety, and mentioning that he will be eagerly waiting for good news from the border town. Although I'm not 100% sure what exactly Operation Eastern Wind 001 entails, as far as I remember, the prince wants to give Timothy a real shakeup, so he thinks twice about attacking the border town before the months of demons hit, because the town needs to get ready for the winter. The scene then transitions to a ship cruising down the river. Inside the boat, we spot Lady May, making her way back to the border town after quite some time. As she gazes out, she notices the witches' ship sailing towards Silver City for Operation Eastern Wind. Though Lady May has no clue where exactly the witches are headed, she wonders if they're on their way to Willowtown, or perhaps Silver City. While she's thinking this, a swarm of enthusiastic little girls suddenly surrounds her, eager to chat with Miss May. Just then, Miss Eileen apologizes to Lady May, explaining that she couldn't answer all the kids' questions, so she sent them over to her. Of course, May looks a bit annoyed by the swarm of little girls, but their excitement is hard to ignore. They eagerly ask her if Prince Roland really wrote the play just for her. Despite her irritation, May smiles and happily sets the record straight, telling them that Prince Roland didn't write the play for her. It was actually Sister Scroll, the director of education in the border town, who wrote it for all the witches. One of the little girls then asks why Bella got in trouble for insulting the play if Prince Roland didn't write it. May explains that while Prince Roland didn't write the script, he did approve it and arranged everything for the performance. So, when Bella insulted the play, she was, in fact, insulting Prince Roland. But then the girls start asking some unsettling questions, revealing that they've heard Prince Roland has royal gray hair and is really handsome. Some even add that he's a bit of a playboy who loves having girls around him. Miss Eileen, clearly not thrilled with the direction the questions are taking, tells them to stop. She reminds them that they're almost at the border town, so they better start getting their luggage ready. Once the girls disperse, Miss Eileen thanks May for helping her bring the kids to the border town, even though their theater lessons aren't finished. May brushes it off, saying it's no big deal. However, Miss Eileen then points out that these kids are still just hatchlings. Even though the prince isn't expecting any hardcore stage actresses, she's concerned that they're too young for the acting gig. May then reassures her friend that she's not planning for the kids to start acting right away. She explains that while they may be far from the stage, they can read the scripts, and that's a valuable skill. And the prince always favors and accepts literate people. He uses these performances to express his views and change public opinion, rather than actually enjoying watching them. Well, this is something we all knew from the beginning. The prince uses these plays to challenge people's perceptions about witches and break down other stereotypes in this primitive society. Eileen is filled with admiration and starts clinging to her friend because she finds May's knowledge and insights truly impressive. As the ship nears the dock, they see a crowd waiting for them, and among them is Eileen's husband, Ferlin. As soon as the ship hits the dock, Eileen rushes to her husband and hugs him tightly. The other little girls disembarking also can't help but notice how handsome Ferlin looks. However, Miss May's lover, our knight Carter, is nowhere to be seen. Ferlin turns to May and thanks her for helping Eileen during the incident with Miss Bella, who had been berating everyone and insulting the prince. May quickly waves off the thanks. Ferlin then playfully teases his wife, saying she would have been in tears if May hadn't been there to put a stop to Bella, so he is glad that nothing worse happened. It's clear the couple gets along well, and seeing them in such a playful state makes May crack a smile. But despite her grin, there's an undoubtable hint of sadness lingering on her face. Later, May heads home, her mind consumed with thoughts of Carter. She's wondering why he isn't here, especially since his letter promised that he will give her a surprise when she gets back to the border town. It stings her a bit that he didn't even show up to help with her luggage, let alone throwing a party for her. She figures he must be tied up with his nightly duties for the prince. Just then, as if on cue, Knight Carter bursts onto the scene, looking utterly exhausted, and he calls out to May as he rushes over. Hearing his voice, May turns with a mix of dissatisfaction and curiosity. Carter quickly explains that he just heard the ship from Long Song Fortress had arrived and hurried from the barracks as fast as he could. And he also tries to explain himself like a typical husband, saying he didn't realize she'd be arriving this early. Noticing her heavy luggage, he also gets a bit frantic, realizing she must be worn out from hauling it all. But as he looks at her, May's face lights up with a genuine smile. It's clear that any tiredness she felt evaporates the moment she sees Carter. May offers Carter a drink, but he says he still has duties to fulfill. Then, he starts blushing as he pulls out a little box, explaining that he's here to give her a small present. Naturally, May's curiosity piques, and she wonders if it's a new product that just hit the market. But, as it turns out, there's a diamond ring inside the box. Carter gets down on one knee, takes her hand, and asks if she will marry him. May is utterly taken aback, and the unexpected proposal leaves her in a state of delightful shock. The next day, Carter is in Roland's office, and he's so over-the-top happy it's actually starting to creep the prince out. Nevertheless, the prince dives back into his office duties. As he reads through a report, he reveals that with the help of witches from Slumber Island, the border town's construction projects are progressing at breakneck speed. The steel bridge over the Redwater River is finished, aligned perfectly with the new wall, and all the credit goes to Sister Lotus and Carl, who is also the head of the construction department. After working with Lotus for a while, he is really eagerly waiting for Lotus to join the department and work with him. The prince's streak of good news continues when the mad scientist bursts into the room, looking just as pleased as Carter. It's clear he's here with good news, otherwise, he wouldn't waste his time coming here. The mad scientist quickly reveals that he has finally found the way to produce acid at a huge scale. The prince is totally boggled by the news and tells Kyle Sichi to take him to the labs. A short while later, we find ourselves at the Riverside Laboratories. Charles, the assistant to Sichi, bows and pays his respects to the prince. And it doesn't take Roland long to figure out that Charles is the same person he's heard so much about from Mr. Kyle. After exchanging pleasantries, the prince shifts his focus to the big containers lined up in the background, and quickly asks Charles how these contraptions are used to produce acid. Kyle Sichi explains that it's all based on the reaction equations they learned in Chemistry 101. He details how, once the acid is isolated, it's burned in the furnace. The resulting gas is then heated and stored in a lead container. The prince is fascinated and asks again if all these containers are indeed made of lead. Kyle Sichi nods and explains that lead is the only material that can handle the acid's corrosive power. The lead pipes at the top pump nitric acid into the system. Under carbon dioxide's influence, the nitric acid breaks down into nitrogen oxides. These oxides mix with water and carbon dioxide to create an acidic mix that flows out from the bottom hole. He says this reaction is great because the nitrogen oxides just deliver oxygen without consuming anything, so you don't need a lot of nitric acid to keep it going. The prince then asks about how much acid they can produce. Charles explains that with this setup, they can make about a week's worth of acid in a single day. It's just a prototype right now, but if they build bigger ones, they could produce even more. Roland is really satisfied with the info and states that once Anna gets back from Silver City, they'll work on larger production units. He also mentions that if they run out of lead, they can use metal instead, since Miss Soraya's paint can handle corrosion. That's when Kyle Sichi finally gets up the nerve to make his long-awaited request. He asks the prince if he can be granted Chemistry 201. After all, he has fulfilled his promise, and all 5 of their labs are now brimming with apprentices thanks to their success in acid manufacturing. A bit later, the prince is hunched over in his office, while Lady Scroll is busy arranging books. The prince is deep into trying to remember his physics and chemistry knowledge, but it's clear he's having a rough time. Lady Scroll can hear him mumbling to himself, and though she wants to help, she can only jot down whatever the prince tells her. She admits that this stuff is way more complex than the math and natural sciences she's used to, and it's no wonder he's struggling. She then walks over to him, tells him to take a break. The prince, however, expresses how envious he is of her memorization skills. He jokes that if he were like her, he wouldn't have to stress about tests, would have gotten into the best schools, and landed the best jobs. Of course, Lady Scroll doesn't quite get the prince's comment and assumes he must have been tested in the royal court. The prince quickly agrees, as he does not want to expose his true identity. Lady Scroll then explains that memorizing everything isn't always the best approach. Sometimes, it's better to let go of things, and she always has to keep those bad memories, even though she wants to just forget them. The prince reflects on this, and he feels quite sad for her as he agrees that she is absolutely right. It does not take her long to notice that the prince is feeling quite down because of her, so she reassures him, saying she's doing fine, and that everything is in the past already. She then begins to think to herself how Roland Wimbledon is unlike any elite she's ever encountered. Despite his vast knowledge, all he seems concerned about is passing it on to others. He doesn't act superior, even though he's in a position of power. Meanwhile, the prince decides to call it a day. Lady Scroll asks if he plans to continue this tomorrow. The prince happily says no and tells her to give Kyle Sichi the notes along with a physics textbook, as it'll keep him busy for a while. Later we find ourselves by a pond. The fish happily begin munching on the dead skin of Lady Leaf as she dips her feet into the water. Sister Scroll also joins the scene and asks her friend if her feet are feeling okay. Lady Leaf responds that her toes are in great shape now and she doesn't have to worry about them freezing in the coming winter. Lady Scroll then looks around at the lush greenery and asks her friend if she planted all these plants. The green girl nods, saying those are grapevines, fruit trees, and crops. She also mentions that there are lots of bird nests in the area and that Honey's messenger pigeon lives there. Lady Leaf then explains that the prince always told her that evolution lies in a witch's understanding of their power. She finds plant cells fascinating and initially thought they should function as a single unit. She points out how a bunch of leaves can become a vine, and if they're all different, they can never combine into one. She reflects on how her powers are tied to the ecosystem itself. Looking at her thriving green garden, with birds living and flourishing, she feels that she's found her path forward. The scene transitions to the outskirts of Silver City, where the witches have set up their camp near the mountains. Everyone is now in their balloon, ready for the next phase of their mission. As they're flying down, Anna tells Lightning to come inside the balloon and rest since there are no demons around. But Lightning energetically states that she can fly as long as she wants. Wendy turns to her and asks if she's feeling nervous. Lightning denies it, and confidently states that she's fully prepared to steer the nuke in the right direction, especially since she's practiced so many times, and the Silver City castle is so large, there's no way she'll miss. Wendy, however, advises her not to be careless. She reminds Lightning that safety is their top priority, and reassures her that the recent issues with the devils were not her fault, so she should not feel accountable for anything. Lightning quickly denies having any such thoughts, while Wendy can tell that she has been feeling down lately ever since that encounter with the demons. So she reassures Lightning once again that she should not worry about anything as she's not bad at combat, but just a bit inexperienced. Anna also agrees and states that most witches do not come near to Nightingale when it comes to fighting experience. They further tells her that no one is blaming her, so she does not have feel bad about anything and make things difficult for herself. Maggie joins the scene, quickly reporting that the inner district of the capital is now within sight. As everyone takes in the magnificent view, they are left awestruck by how they can see everything so clearly. Wendy then reflects on their past experiences, noting that when they first met Soraya and Echo, this area was considered the most dangerous part of Grey Castle. It was tough on witches, with one being executed nearly every month at the Outer District plazas, and staying there even for one extra day was another day of watching fellow sisters suffer. Meanwhile, Lightning is giving herself a pep talk as they are about to nuke the shit out of this city. She thinks to herself that if bombing Timothy is all she has to do in order to make a change, she's ready to do it. As they hover directly above the city, Wendy tells everyone to get the bomb ready and open the doors. The moment everyone's been waiting for arrives, and the nuke begins its descent. The team cheers for Lightning, shouting that it's now all up to her. Lightning quickly accelerates, and positions herself right over the nuke as it heads towards the main castle. Once she steers the nuke into the correct trajectory, she yanks the parachute from the missile, allowing it to descend even faster, and she herself starts flying off into the other direction, because the prince has instructed her to not look at the bomb once it explodes. But naturally, she just can't resist the urge to look at the bomb before it explodes, because she wants to see the downfall of Timothy before her own eyes. When the bomb hits, it erupts with a colossal explosion. The civilians around the town are stunned by the massive bang. They watch in shock as smoke billows from the castle and the entire building starts to shake. Even Timothy, sitting inside, feels the shockwave. Panic spreads through the chamber as everyone wonders if it's an earthquake. Timothy then quickly yells at everyone, telling everyone to shut up and demands to be escorted to the basement. The knight standing around quickly promises to protect their king, and Timothy quickly starts heading toward the basement without wasting any time. Debris continues to rain down, and Timothy grits his teeth out of annoyance. He's fuming at the thought that only a massive amount of snow powder could have caused such destruction, and he's irritated by how Roland managed to get his hands on such a powerful alchemy weapon. Timothy suspects that Garcia might have given it to Roland before leaving Clearwater. As soon as he thinks this, he can't shake the possibility that Roland and Garcia might be teaming up against him. But he's baffled by how they managed to smuggle so much snow powder in the castle to make such a big bang. He grabs one of his knights by the collar and orders him to rally the other knights and search the whole district. They need to check the sewers, gardens, sheds, and anywhere else snow powder might be hidden. He also tells them to arrest anyone who looks even a little suspicious, no matter their rank. And he insists that every last servant and maid in the castle gets searched. Nobody's getting a pass. Timothy's knight quickly runs off to carry out the orders, while Timothy himself just trembles in utter frustration, biding his time to respond to Roland and send a clear message that he's not as invincible as he thinks. But the thought of Roland smiling after this little sweet victory is really getting on his nerves. He punches the wall in utter frustration, replaying Roland's threat letter about the end of his rule over and over in his head. Meanwhile, back in Border Town, we see Honey's pigeon perched on the window. Apparently, it just delivered the message from Theo, who is already stationed at Silver City to report about the Operation Eastern Wind 00, and the letter confirms the successful execution of the mission. It explains that since the castle was quickly placed on lockdown after the nuke dropped, they didn't manage to investigate the effects of the explosion. However, by nighttime, nearly every citizen knew about the incident, and all the pubs, hotels, and plazas around the city were buzzing with the same discussion. Many now believe that Timothy died in the blast, and people are starting to think that Roland killed him, especially since our prince had already sent that threat letter to Timothy. Everyone's now thinking our boy might soon become the new ruler of the kingdom. The letter further explains that the elite territories are mostly silent, and the castle's reaction was very quick, hinting that Timothy Wimbledon is likely still alive. Also, there's talk that the attack came from the sky, with some citizens claiming they saw a white object drop on the capital at incredible speed. All in all, if word spreads that the attack was Roland's punishment for Timothy's tyranny, many people will believe it. You see, reports about Timothy's oppressive orders are already circulating, and compiling them into a solid case will be quite effective. Theo further writes that through this rumor mill, the message will reach every citizen's ear. Plus, Theo is also keeping an eye on the soldiers stationed in the east, but Timothy should be preoccupied with his current troubles, so there is nothing much to worry about. Seems like all of the news in the letter is quite satisfactory, and the prince believes that if Eastern Wind 01 can really push Timothy to deploy his troops, it will be a huge win. Now he just has to wait for the witches to return. It's been days since he's seen Anna, and nobody's been sneaking fish snacks from his drawer, which is something he's finding hard to get used to. Suddenly the door creaks open, and Knight Carter rushes in, reporting that 2 fleets have arrived at the docks, and they are Margaret's merchants apparently. He adds that some recruiters who had been sent to the southern region have returned with 400 to 500 refugees. The city hall is following the assigned plan of virus testing before allowing anyone inside. The scene then cuts to the labs, where Charles looks out the window, noting how unusually busy the docks are today. Meanwhile, his senior is absorbed in his own work. His junior then tells him to get some sleep, but the senior says he's fine. He mentions that it only took a few pages of reading for him to realize he knows nothing about the world. He's always thought alchemy was just about experimenting with elements, and he now finds observing the sunrise and sunset to be a pointless activity. His assistant counters this, asking if that isn't just how things are. After all, observation of the sun and stars is left to astronomers, while farmers and apothecaries handle the research on plants. His senior then emphasizes that this is why he feels they know so little. According to the prince's book, everything is interconnected from the very beginning. It explains how rocks, flowers, lightning, and fire all consist of the same matter and operate under the same rules, and chemistry is just a small part of this broader understanding. After reading this much of Chemistry 201, he's begun to grasp what the prince meant and why they can predict an element's qualities and reactions even if they can't directly observe them. The senior admits that this perspective has opened a door to a broader understanding beyond just chemistry. The assistant acknowledges what his senior is saying and hopes to understand these 2 books in the future as well. The next scene cuts to the Wolfheart Kingdom, currently under siege by Archbishop Maine. His lackey quickly reports that the city breaker is ready. Maine then asks if the witches are prepared as well, and the assistant confirms, adding that they've made sure to keep them hidden. Satisfied with the report, he tells his lackey to return to his position. Before the lackey leaves, Maine further inquires about the whereabouts of Zero and Isabella. The junior promptly informs him that they're currently interrogating prisoners in the eastern part of the camp and asks if he wants him to call them over. But Maine denies it, saying he'll go himself to take a look. As he strides forward, he catches sight of them, and can't help but think about how different they are from the witches the church has raised so far. Even in serious times like these, they seem completely carefree. Though if these 2 were under his command, Maine wouldn't hesitate to punish them for the stunts they pull. However, he's powerless against these 2 because they hold the same rank as archbishops. Maine then orders one of the knights to have the judgment soldiers leave the area at once, including those watching the prisoners. At that moment, the 2 ladies speak up, asking Maine why he's butting in when they were just about to have some fun with the prisoners. Maine tells them that interrogating these prisoners serves no purpose in besieging Wolfheart City. Besides, these people are just scouts they found on the road, so there's barely any intel to extract, so he recommends they both hurry to the front lines instead. Lady Isabella reassures him not to worry, promising that as long as she's here, she won't let a single important enemy slip away. However, she also points out that she can't stop Lady Zero from causing a ruckus, since she just loves putting people to judgment by her own hands. The enemy soldier, despite his injuries, quickly stands against Zero. He shoots an arrow, then tosses his crossbow aside and grabs his sword, attempting to slash at her. But Zero vanishes from her spot, leaving his sword to strike nothing but empty ground. The soldier is left awestruck, while Zero simply stands there with the arrow in her mouth. After spitting it out, she asks the soldier where he's trying to aim since she's right in front of him. The soldier turns, but before he can react, Zero leaps into the air, grabs the knight's head, and twists it with a sickening crunch. The poor knight collapses to the ground, blood flowing from his mouth as he finally kisses goodbye to his dear life. Zero then turns to the remaining captives, casually stating that they're next. By the way, did you notice these women have pointy ears? That means there are elves in this world too, though we don't know much about them yet. But let's hope we find out soon. The other captives, terrified out of their minds, start running for their lives. But Zero springs into action, catching one poor guy with a strange aura that literally chokes him to death. Once he's dead, the aura she threw at him pops out of his lifeless body, and she turns to another captive, who's absolutely losing his mind before he meets his end as well. Zero looks at him closely, and with a creepy calm over her face, tells him that God has revealed everything to her. She knows his parents were farmers who were recruited into the army's scout division under the orders of the Wolfheart King. When they returned to report, they weren't allowed back home, and they were sent straight back to the front. She gently places her hand under his chin like a caring mother and reveals the harsh truth, which is that he wasn't sent back to his family because that no longer existed. His father, mother, and siblings were just like him, used up and discarded by the Wolfheart King. She further explains in detail that his father died in an accident while fixing the walls, and his mother was punished with whipping during manual labor and is now in critical condition. The boy begins to cry, trying to deny what she's saying and dismissing it as nothing more than a lie. Zero then extends her hands and states that this all happened because the elites never saw commoners as real people. To them, commoners are just livestock. However, she mentions that the church seeks to end this evil and injustice to create a new world under God's protection. The man asks what he should do, and she tells him to listen to his heart, as only God may judge him. He responds that he's willing to do anything she tells him, but he needs her promise that she'll save his mother. In response, she pulls out a weed-like grass and tells him to eat it, assuring him it will help calm his emotions. The desperate man quickly begins to eat the weed, but his face soon goes pale, and he finds himself choking, blood gushing from his mouth as he dies on the spot. As he collapses with a thud, she turns to Maine and asks if this method of judgment reminds him of how Archbishop Heather used to punish. Maine, visibly annoyed, asks why she had to trick him and poison him. If it had been Heather, she would have made sure to turn him into a loyal follower rather than a corpse. Zero then points out that everything she told him about his family was a bunch of hot air, and if he had found out the truth later, he would have been furious and could have caused trouble for the church. She then tells Maine to trust her, as everything she does is for the church. Despite her reassurances, Maine looks deeply disturbed by her actions and simply walks off. He tells her that the attack will begin soon, instructing her to get ready, stick with the plan, and make sure to deal with the Wolfheart King and the Queen of Clearwater. Confidently, Zero responds that they're surely going to die, because with her and Isabella on the church's side, there's no way the Wolfheart forces will escape. A short while later, the city breaker is fired. The giant fireball crashes into the wall, shattering it completely with a single blow. As the knights charge forward, Zero and Isabella stand atop a hill, observing everything closely. Zero notes how mortals can't win against demons, which is why the church created the Divine Punishment Army. Isabella also points out how the Wolfheart army must now defend against their holy soldiers, only to be turned into mere flesh. Isabella then suggests helping to clear the battlefield early, but Zero reminds her that they'll win easily regardless. They should save their powers for the main objective ahead. Isabella agrees, but is curious about why Zero toyed with that scout, especially since Archbishop Maine didn't seem too pleased about it. She worries that Maine might not be fond of such judgment, and that she might end up on his bad side. Zero smiles and says that if Maine gets upset, it will be because he hasn't become Pope yet. Once he ascends to the highest floor of the Holy Archives, he'll understand that this is the true way to salvation. She further adds that God has never descended upon their world. Instead, he has fabricated a grand goal for them to chase, and everyone craves the God's blessings. something she thinks is akin to the judgment they've seen earlier. She further points out that God has never guaranteed whether the goal is real or if they're just wandering aimlessly. Yet, they're still willing to throw everything away just to meet the God. She further states that she had been to the highest floor, and Grand Pope Holiness O'Brien is the one who told her these things. He's not a witch and is nearing the end of his life due to his age. She's heard that as mortals die, their lives flash before their eyes, and they often spill their secrets. So she is thinking of consuming him just for this reason. Isabella says she can't do that, to which Zero responds, of course she can't, and even Maine would be furious. She reassures her friend not to worry, saying she knows her boundaries. Isabella reflects that after consuming so many people, she doesn't think there's much left in this world Zero hasn't experienced. She's never focused on anything in particular, so everything she does is purely for fun, and her sense of fun is quite morbid. It's not clear exactly how she consumes humans, but it seems likely that the aura-like thing we saw earlier is how she devours their life force. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurs, scattering all the soldiers in the area. They're getting burned alive from the blast. Zero quickly perks up, wondering if these are the alchemy weapons they've been using. They seem pretty powerful and effective against demon beasts. Isabella adds that there are many more stones of divine judgment behind the wall, and 2 of them are quite significant. She's banking on the idea that these belong to some important people. Zero looks pleased to hear this and decides it's time to head down. But her friend reminds her that these people aren't the Wolfheart King or the Queen of Clearwater, and the strongest energy sources are still in the castle, so she asks her friend if she is sure she wants to go down. Zero gives her friend a quick wink and says that an easy win is better than an expensive one, so she'll help out a bit. The scene cuts to Garcia at the dock, just stepping off her ship. Suddenly, a sand dweller who is escorting Garcia notices the 2 elf ladies casually strolling around. The knights and the sand dweller quickly position themselves to guard Garcia at all costs. Meanwhile, the girls remain cool as cucumbers, and Isabella quickly uses her powers on the knights. At first, nothing seems to happen, and the knights charge at her. But soon, they begin coughing up blood. Zero dashes toward the sand dweller and starts messing with his mind using her powers. Garcia then demands to know how she is using her powers in the presence of the stones. Zero smiles and says the stones aren't what they think they are. She then jumps into the air, telling Garcia that she doesn't need to know because she's as good as dead now. As Garcia watches Zero prepare to crash down on her, her mind suddenly flashes back to a memory. Inside her memory, she finds herself sitting in the castle yard, watching her younger siblings and herself playing around, looking small and carefree. She gazes at the slab she's sitting on and vividly remembers her father replacing those bricks with cobblestones. It seems that even Zero is inside her mind, complimenting Garcia on having such a nice place to rest. Garcia then asks her if she is a witch from the church. Zero promptly introduces herself, saying she can't simply be dismissed as just any witch, since she's a pure witch, different from other decaying bloodlines who just die after some time. As soon as Garcia hears pure witch, she realizes Zero is just another tool of the church. Garcia then demands to know what this place is and if Zero created it with her magic. She's pretty sure it's just an illusion and won't be fooled by mere mirages. She then begins to tightly grip those stones she is holding, and her hand starts to bleed. Zero finally reveals that this is her world of consciousness, which she calls the battlefield of souls. Here, they can tear each other apart, and the winner takes all while the loser surrenders everything, just as described in the Holy Records. The mention of the battlefield of souls shocks Garcia. As she is thinking about all of this, Zero pierces her with a sword, leaving blood gushing out of her stab wound. But despite the heavy bleeding, she is returned back into the consciousness realm, and she is still standing in one piece there. The bloodstains from the wound she took before dying are still visible over her chest. There, we meet Zero once again, who explains about the rules of the battlefield. Currently, Garcia's consciousness is currently limited, and pain from each death will feel real. This will chip away at both her physical and mental strength, and when she suffers more than she can handle, the real slumber will begin. Zero further adds that with every death, she will return to her original state. Most people last around 3 to 4 deaths, but she's seen others withstand 7 or 8, and even more. She then throws a jab at Garcia, saying that if Garcia gives up, it's totally understandable. After all, dying over and over again is an incredibly painful grind, and choosing to escape isn't exactly cowardly, especially when the outcome is already decided. That's when Zero suddenly pulls out a massive sword, leaving Garcia wondering how this is even possible. I mean, she's only wearing a robe, so how could she have been hiding such a huge weapon? But then it finally makes sense to her, and she wonders maybe she summoned it out of thin air. Finally, Zero brings the sword crashing down, but Garcia whips out this giant shield from nowhere. After that shield, she now has a bow in her hands, while Zero is suddenly pinned to a cross sign like a doll. Garcia, on the other hand, takes aim, quickly fires an arrow, and it pierces Zero's chest. That's when Garcia declares that since it's her world of consciousness, she can do whatever she wants. She imagines a javelin and starts walking towards Zero, contemplating how many holes she should put in her. Zero responds calmly, telling her as much as she desires. But just as Garcia is about to strike with the javelin, their roles suddenly swap. Now Garcia is the one hanging on the cross, while Zero stands there with her sword. In the next moment, our pirate girl loses her head, but somehow she's back in one piece. Seeing herself unharmed, has no idea what's going on, while the witch remarks that it wouldn't be a real fight if she didn't understand how things worked. So she decides to give her peace of mind to her. That's when Zero repeats her earlier words, saying that the winner takes it all, and the loser surrenders everything. She explains that among the people she has consumed, there is a type of witch who is extraordinarily powerful. These witches possess seemingly limitless strength, speed, and invulnerability against the stones of divine judgment. And the church has a special name for them, known as transcendence. She makes it clear that Garcia won't be able to defeat her with her usual methods, and if she wants to survive, she'll have to try a lot harder. Not gonna lie, I hate this kind of thing where people are stuck in imagination or shit like that. Anyway, their fight continues with both of them conjuring up weapons through their imagination, trading blows back and forth. Sometimes Garcia gets the upper hand, other times Zero does, and they go at it for quite a while. Eventually, the witch explains to Miss Eyepatch that while conjuring weapons out of thin air is relatively easy and doesn't drain much energy, repeatedly recovering her body takes a massive toll. She warns that eventually, Garcia will run out of energy and be left feeling exhausted. Zero even suggests that after her next death, she might fall into eternal death. Even though Miss Eyepatch looks pretty exhausted, she manages to throw a jab, reminding Zero how she was screaming while being burned alive not too long ago. Zero then explains that since becoming a purified witch, she's received substantial support from the church. They've taught her knowledge and fighting skills, and she's trained with judgment warriors who, even knowing they were sacrifices, gladly entered the battlefield of souls in the world of consciousness. These warriors honed her skills through their struggles and, after their deaths, peacefully accepted their fate, passing on all their insights and experience to her once she consumed them. She even mentions that she once swallowed an extraordinarily powerful witch who had impressive strength. During that battle of souls, she nearly lost, but in the end, she prevailed by relying on demon weapons and everything she'd learned. Because of the unique nature of her magic, she can't actually transform into an extraordinary being or use the abilities of other swallowed witches. However, in the world of consciousness, none of that matters. Only a few individuals have ever posed a real threat to her. In the last 200 years, she can't even remember the number of people she swallowed. All their experiences, pain, happiness, sadness, delight, and even their deaths, have become part of her own personal experience. Garcia quickly raises an eyebrow and asks what the hell Zero is trying to pitch with all this talk. Zero replies that she's merely highlighting the vast gap in their strength. The assimilation of so many souls has made her will unmatched, and if Garcia wants to know how many deaths Zero can endure, she clarifies that she can at least withstand 100 deaths now. Garcia just smirks and says she'll be happy to help verify that claim. Despite her confident front, she's actually quite worried inside. Zero, on the other hand, informs Miss Eyepatch that she can't conjure up anything earth-shattering that she hasn't seen before. Garcia can only create things she's familiar with and can grasp. In response, Miss Eyepatch decides to cover the entire garden with snow powder and blow everything, including herself. That's when Zero decides to show Garcia the true power of the church. She conjures up this massive weapon known as City Breaker, and as soon as one giant arrow is fired from it, Garcia is split into 2 equal pieces. This happens repeatedly, and Garcia's death continues in this manner. When she finally collapses to the ground, the witch makes it clear that while having a strong will can delay defeat, it can't change the outcome. With those words, she then wishes Garcia a peaceful rest. After consuming her soul, she returns to reality. Isabella quickly rushes towards her friend, asking what took her so long. She had almost thought that she was going to lose. Zero, however, lights up with interest as she reveals that she found some fascinating things in Garcia's memory. She discovered the formula for snow powder and is surprised to find out it's quite easy to produce. Isabella then suggests they head back to the Holy City to report this discovery to Pope O'Brien. She adds that with Garcia dead, the enemy soldiers will eventually fall to the Judgment Army, so there's nothing to worry about. But before they can start walking, Isabella tells Zero to wait. Of course, Lady Zero looks back and asks what's wrong. Isabella notices that while her friend hasn't changed physically, the look on her face has shifted quite a bit. Nevertheless, they begin to walk away. The scene then transitions to the border town, where the witches and others have finally returned from Silver City after their successful mission. Prince is hosting a grand feast for everyone that night. The atmosphere is lively, with everyone clinking their glasses in a toast. Old Man Barov asks for another toast, this time for Chief Knight Carter, who is about to tie the knot with Miss May. Meanwhile, our little Lightning demands a glass of wine for herself. Wendy reluctantly agrees to the request with a promise that it'll only be one glass. Anna then turns to the prince, and he promptly welcomes her, noting that it must have been a hard journey for her. But she reminds him with a smile that he's already asked this before, and her answer will still remain the same. As they continue chatting, Lightning jumps in between them, eager to hear something good from the prince as well. The prince casually acknowledges her, saying she did well too, making the girl prouder than ever. Her enthusiasm gets the best of her, and she quickly kisses the prince on the cheek. The prince then blushingly asks if this is some kind of custom in the fjords where one must kiss the other person. Lightning enthusiastically confirms that it is, or at least, that's what her father told her. Meanwhile, Sylvie is utterly embarrassed watching Lightning kiss the prince like this, and seeing her bewildered reaction, the prince can't help but wonder if this custom even really exists. Meanwhile, Knight Carter and the old man are still caught up in discussions about Carter's potential marriage. Carter can't help but blush as he explains that the prince has already approved and even offered to help organize the wedding. Over by the side, Sister Lily is absolutely amazed by a piece of bread made from leftover scraps used for explosives. Our little Maggie, who just ate a lot of it, is startled and wonders if her stomach might explode. As everyone is enjoying the evening, the prince steps out onto the balcony. Suddenly, Nightingale appears and grabs him by the shoulder. He looks at her with a smile as she advises him to be careful not to catch a cold. She then asks what's on his mind, and the prince casually replies that he just had a sudden urge to take a look at his territory. She notices how the town is still bustling, even though it's nighttime, and the streets are full of people. That's when the prince reminds her that the premiere of the new drama, Dawn, is happening tonight. For most of the newcomers to the town, it's probably their first show in months, so they're eager to see Miss May and Miss Irene again. Nightingale then reflects on how, almost a year ago, this place was nearly a ghost town when she first snuck in. Now even from up here, she can feel the joyful atmosphere. The prince admits he still has a lot to do, such as improving infrastructure, healthcare, education, and more. He's determined to transform the Western Territory into a solid foundation for unification. But when Nightingale asks what he plans to do about the witches, he reassures her that he's committed to supporting them as well. We then see Sister Lightning sneaking some food into her pouch. But just as she's doing it, Maggie catches her red-handed, leaving her utterly embarrassed. Quickly, she whispers to Maggie to keep quiet, and tells her she's found an interesting place in the misty forest she plans to explore tomorrow, so she asks her friend if she'd like to come along. Not surprisingly, Maggie agrees right away. The adventurous girl then tells her to pack rations and supplies for a day, and don't forget some weapons too. And finally, she makes sure Maggie knows this exploration is a secret, and Maggie promises to keep it hush-hush. The next day, they head out to the misty forest. Maggie seems a bit let down, expecting it to be as exciting as stealing hawk eggs. But the gloomy atmosphere doesn't quite meet her expectations. Lightning reassures her, saying that while a hawk's nest only has a couple of eggs, these ancient ruins might have some old books or other treasures worth finding. Lightning reassures her that if they find something cool, the prince will reward them with a whole basket of eggs. She can cook them however she wants, and they'll last a while. Hearing this, Maggie's eyes light up, and she excitedly urges Lightning to hurry up and find those books. As they're about to enter the ruins, Lightning tells Maggie to keep it quiet because there might be devils around. This gives Maggie the shivers, but they keep moving. Before they enter the ruins, we hear Lightning thoughts where she thinks about how every time she picks up speed flying, it feels like there's a devil chasing her. This fear started back when she was exploring the stone tower. Her dad used to say that fear comes from the unknown, and that to beat it, you've got to face it head on. She's worried that if she can't shake this fear, it'll be tough to fly, let alone explore. She also frets that the prince might be mad at her later or even punish her, and she's sure the other sisters at the castle will be worried. But despite all that, she's determined to explore. She's brought her revolver, and Maggie's right there with her. She then tells Maggie to wait up top while she checks things out inside. Gathering her courage, she starts stepping in, repeatedly reminding herself to overcome her fear of the unknown and face it head on. As she peeks inside, she notices that the devil she saw last time isn't there anymore, so she decides to venture further. That's when she hears a familiar, haunting voice begging for help. The voice keeps pleading for someone to save her, and the pain in her voice is evident. The desperate cries make Lightning shiver with dread and fear. Eventually, she can't take it anymore and rushes back outside, scared out of her wits. Maggie suggests that they extinguish their torches and sneak in, reasoning that the devils won't be able to see them. But Lightning points out that they won't be able to see anything either. Maggie then proposes that she could turn into an owl, which would solve the problem of darkness. Lightning finds this idea pretty effective but remains concerned. She explains that if someone can continue to scream for months in complete darkness without changing their tone or pitch, it makes her wonder what's really inside. She speculates that if someone can survive that long in such conditions, they probably have a way to detect prey. Otherwise, they would have starved by now. As Lightning is about to give up, Maggie tries to ignite her adventurous spirit by asking if she really wants to pass up the chance to bust a myth like this. Lightning's eyes light up with excitement, and she insists that a true explorer would never back down from verifying a myth, and it would all be for nothing if they ran away now. On a more serious note, though, Lightning then asks Maggie if she's doing this just for the basket of eggs. Maggie rolls her eyes but can't hide a glimmer of greed in her expression. Anyhow, they head back inside. As they descend the staircase, they notice a strange magic stone embedded in the wall. Lightning pulls out her revolver, ready for whatever might come next. They finally reach the source of the voice and see a bunch of devils guarding a witch trapped inside a crystal-like prison. The witch is unconscious and frozen, but her voice keeps calling out for help. Maggie decides to take a closer look, but Lightning gets terrified. But the little bird reassures her scared friend that the devils look like they're as good as dead. To prove her point, she flies over to one of them and gives it a push. The devil cracks like a rock and starts to crumble. They check the others, and it turns out the rest are also just stone statues. Curious, they look at the witch trapped inside the stone and wonder if she really is a witch. Suddenly, they hear the voice asking for help again. Looking behind the statue, they discover a red stone that seems to be the true source of the voice. With this new discovery, they head back to the border town to report everything to the prince. They explain that there's a witch sealed inside, but it might also be an ordinary person trapped by the witch. The prince asks who was calling for help if the witch is sealed inside. Lightning then shows the prince the box they found behind the sealed witch. Inside is the same crystal they saw earlier, which seems to be linked to the mysterious voice. Lightning quickly activates the crystal, and the voice coming from it spooks the prince. Just then, Nightingale reappears and confirms that she can detect faint traces of magic, similar to the kind witches use. The prince deduces that this must be a magical recording, and that the woman sealed inside is likely a witch. He then asks Lightning if there were any other stones like this. Lightning admits she wasn't paying much attention, as most of the place was flooded, and she was focused on getting the news to him. The prince gives her a gentle tap on the head and tells her not to face danger alone in the future, especially with situations like this. Lightning blushes, touched by the prince's kind but firm advice. The prince then instructs Nightingale to summon all members of the Witch Union and Iron Axe to the office, as their investigation into the ruins is about to begin, and they need to prepare. Once everyone is gathered in the council room, the prince explains that they've found a crystal coffin inside the ancient ruins that shows no signs of deterioration. In the moist underground environment, they discovered a magic stone that emits cries for help, and a group of devils turned into stone statues. He asks the council for their thoughts on the matter. Anna quickly asks if the prince is suggesting that the person trapped inside is a witch. The prince agrees, saying that if she's still alive, they might learn more about what happened hundreds of years ago. However, Sister Scroll and Lady Leaf voice their concerns. They point out that if she is a witch, there's a chance she might not be on their side. The prince agrees with their concerns and notes that the ruins are from the church, so she might be with the church as well, and by the looks of her appearance might have been a high-status member. If she's truly a witch, things could get tricky. Lily jumps in, calling everyone crazy for assuming the witch must be on their side. She questions who could survive for 400 years, and speculates that the person inside might crumble when the crystal shatters. Lightning argues that the witch looks alive, with color in her skin and lips, which sets her apart from the dead devils. Wendy then starts pinching Lightning's cheeks, insisting that it doesn't matter if the witch is alive or not, because they need to give it a try. Wendy points out that if the woman is really a witch from the church, they just need to put a stone of divine judgment on her. With Anna and Nightingale on their side, it shouldn't be too difficult to restrain her if necessary. The key thing is to find out what she knows about the events from 400 years ago. The prince agrees, emphasizing that understanding devil intel is vital for the town. If the church wants to hide their existence, the truth they're hiding must be significant. Learning it beforehand could give them a crucial advantage when they need it the most. He then asks Iron Axe to report on the First Army. Iron Axe explains that they can only deploy 50 men from the First Army. Most of the squad members are out recruiting refugees, leaving only 500 soldiers in the town. He also reminds the prince that while Timothy may have suffered an attack from the heavens, there's a risk he might target the western region at any time. The First Army must be well prepared to defend the town. The prince acknowledges that deploying only 50 men isn't ideal, as devils can throw spears and they could suffer heavy losses. He suggests a better approach would be a simultaneous push by both ground troops and a hot air balloon, with witches handling close combat and infantry focusing on ranged attacks. Suddenly, they hear commotion outside. When they look, they see heavy snow falling, signaling the arrival of months of demons. Right on cue, monsters start appearing on the other side of the wall. Wendy points out that they're still in the last month of autumn, so it's strange for it to be snowing. Iron Axe explains that this is unusual. They've been living in the town for 7 or 8 years and have never seen anything like this before. The prince opens the window and extends his hand out, clearly annoyed to see the snow arriving a month earlier than expected. The scene transitions to the fjords, at Slumber Island, where Thunder, Lightning's father, is visiting the witches. Princess Tilly expresses surprise at his visit, because she did not imagine that the first customer of Slumberspell is Thunder himself. She then thanks him for the help to explore the ruins for the last time, and Thunder reassures her that there's no need for gratitude and that he's willing to come again, and they don't have to pay him anything for tagging along. Tilly then asks if he always intended to come, to which Thunder reveals that he is an adventurer through and through, so he will always be ready for his next adventure. He was shocked by what he saw at the ruins through that telescope, particularly a stone door on a cliff, and he's very curious to learn more about it. He wanted to fly there immediately. If you can't recall, Thunder is mentioning the ruins where Princess Tilly found the scriptures. Tilly shares that she's planning to visit the border town to speak with the leader of the Witch Union, and to witness the months of demons herself. She invites Thunder to join her. Thunder declines, saying he can't go because he doesn't want his daughter to tag along with him and get involved in risky explorations. He lost her mother and doesn't want to risk losing her too. Tilly reassures him that she will ensure nothing happens to Lightning, as she is one of the witches. Back to the business matter, Ash brings out the contract papers. Tilly reminds him that while he has been very helpful, employing witches is not free. The man also agrees, acknowledging that business is business, and this is a common tradition. Once Thunder parts his way after paying his dues, Ash is left bewildered by how Thunder has so much money. Tilly explains that it's not surprising because Thunder is the most famous explorer in the Bay, and discovering new territories and treasures brings him great wealth. Ash then raises a concern that creating a business organization like Slumberspell could bring them wealth but might also attract the church's attention to the witch's power. Tilly responds that she doesn't care about the money. Her goal is to help more people understand Slumber Island, build connections, and show that witches are harmless. Just like Thunder, she also believes that fear comes from the unknown, and witches are no different. The fear in the Bay and the kingdom stems from the church's lies and the public's ignorance. Tilly then asks about Maggie and why she hasn't returned to the island yet. She wonders if something happened over there, so she asks Ash about it. Ash casually replies, saying maybe there's just a delay, or maybe Maggie doesn't want to come back. Compared to the Bay, the quality of life in Bordertown is much better, so that could be why Maggie doesn't want to return. She also reminds Tilly that this was the exact reason she was against sending witches there in the first place, and she is worried that Lotus and Honey might not want to come back either. That's when Tilly decides she'll just visit Bordertown herself. Upon hearing this, Ash gets frantic and asks if they're leaving right now. The princess calmly reminds her that she's already promised to help fight the demons, and they can bring some of the witches back to the island as well. Plus, if they don't have Lotus, the immigrants from Crescent Bay won't have anywhere to stay next year. They desperately need Lotus to help build homes on Slumber Island. Ash then reminds her that they still have a month until winter, but the princess explains that it's going to take time to get to Bordertown, and besides, if something really has happened there, it's better to go sooner and help out. Plus, she's curious to see how her annoying brother is doing these days. The scene then cuts to Bordertown, at the wall. Winter has arrived, and the soldiers are fighting off monsters. The prince asks for a report, and Knight Carter quickly explains that most of the First Army has combat experience with rifles. A 100-meter section of the wall only needs 10 guards to fend off the demons, making it hard for the wolves to even reach the wall. The monsters are basically target practice for the soldiers. As long as no hybrids show up, the demons don't stand a chance. The prince, pleased with the report, encourages the soldiers to keep up the good work. The prince is clearly glad to see his soldiers performing so well. Their energy and discipline are completely different from the ragtag civilian army they were about a year ago. Suddenly, the prince hears a commotion nearby. Knight Carter quickly explains that there's trouble brewing in the Western District, where the refugees are staying. We then see two commoners duking it out while people on the sidelines cheer for their fellow citizens. A local citizen from Bordertown is getting beaten up pretty badly by a tough refugee, and the refugee doesn't seem to be backing down. That's when Knight Carter steps in, pins the rowdy guy to the ground, and commands him to stop fighting in the name of His Highness. The prince also arrives at the scene and walks over to the injured citizen lying on the ground. He asks for the man's name, and the man responds that his name is Kaya Harris, a member of the city hall. Kaya explains that the refugee was the first to throw a punch while he was just distributing rations. According to Kaya, the refugee launched himself at him like a dog. The refugee, however, points out that's not the whole story. He claims that people are taking advantage of the situation and charging money for rations that were supposed to be free. Hearing this, the prince reflects that all the refugees from the Western Legion have been processed, and only craftsmen or literate people were moved, so commoners are supposed to be left behind. However, this man's vocabulary and demeanor suggest he might not be a typical commoner. The prince turns to the man and states that the rations are indeed free. Before their integration into Border Town, all rations and shelter were promised to be free, and that promise still stands. Everyone present hailed their prince for such generosity. However, the prince makes it clear that fistfights are against the law, especially when they involve a city hall member. He instructs his soldiers to round up everyone involved and states that he will personally oversee the matter. He then turns to Kaya and says he wants to speak with him as well. Back at the castle, both fighters are brought before the prince. He interrogates Kaya about why he intentionally charged refugees for rations during distribution, and this is exactly what led to the conflict between them and the farmers. Kaya, though reluctant, admits to the crime he committed. The old man, Barov, tells the prince that, traditionally, crimes committed by elites would only result in a fine of a few golden royals, while a civilian attacking an elite could face punishments ranging from execution to whipping. However, the prince points out that Kaya is not an elite and has been stripped of his knighthood long ago. Barov agrees and adds that in the past, punishment entirely depended on the ruler's discretion. The prince then asks why there isn't a set law for these situations, and wonders if there are any standard punishments other than amputation or whipping, such as imprisonment. Barov explains that imprisoning someone isn't really a punishment, as the prison is meant for holding suspects until their trial. Keeping them locked up means having to feed them, which could be considered a reward rather than a punishment. Reflecting on this, the prince realizes that the punishment methods from his old world might not be suitable here. He decides to determine the appropriate punishment himself. The prince delivers his final verdict, stating that Kaya Harris is guilty of malfeasance and blackmailing refugees. As punishment, Kaya will be expelled from the city and sentenced to 10 years of labor in the mines. He will also be fined triple the amount he earned through blackmail. The refugee named Wade will receive 10 lashes for attacking a public official. The civilians who participated in the fight can choose between a fine of 2 silvers or 5 lashes. Additionally, rations will continue to be distributed for free, and all money obtained through blackmail will be refunded. And lastly, the sentences will be carried out publicly. Wade's face lights up at the prospect of free rations, and it seems he would even willingly accept another 10 lashes if it meant continuing to receive the rations. Meanwhile, the prince reflects on how quickly the city hall is expanding, matching the refugee population, and how internal security is becoming increasingly challenging. He does not want to create a prosecution agency because he wants all legislation and judgment powers to stay with him. He's aiming for a simple and effective system that doesn't require a lot of people to enforce the law. Suddenly, Nightingale appears and asks about his thoughts. The prince explains that he's planning to create a new department to oversee the city hall and tackle any threats to the Western region. This new department will be independent of both the city hall and the First Army. He wants to name it the Western Security Agency, and she will be the one in charge of this agency. He believes that she is the only one who can uncover the truth, as no one can hide anything from her. The prince offers Nightingale ice cream in the winter and other treats she loves as an incentive. However, she quickly pinches his hand and tells him it doesn't matter, because she will always agree with whatever he wants her to do. Wade finishes taking his 10 lashes, and an old man from his group looks at his back, which is covered in dried blood. The old man suggests rubbing some ash on the wounds, but Wade says there's no need, because the blood has already dried, and the knight told him it would heal in 2 or 3 days. The old man isn't convinced, warning that it might take longer because the wounds could get infected, leading to sores. Wade, however, says something surprising. He claims that he doesn't feel any pain at all. Instead, there's a mild itching and a cool sensation, which he takes as a sign that he's already healing. He explains that after the lashes, they poured a bucket of water on his back, and although he expected it to hurt, it didn't. The knight even mentioned that the water could eliminate viruses and bacteria. The old man is completely baffled by Wade's explanation, and they both suspect it might have something to do with the witches. The old man tells Wade he shouldn't have gotten into the fight in the first place. Wade counters by explaining that if he hadn't exposed the crooked ration distributors, they'd still be swindling everyone out of their money. He mentions how the prince regularly appears at the Western Wall during the day, and since he promised the rations would be free, he wouldn't tolerate anything that sullied his name. Exposing the scam was the best way to make sure the prince found out, even if it took a simple scuffle to get his attention. Wade also claims he did his research and found out that everyone, from local citizens to indentured farmers, praised the prince for his generosity. Wade then tells the old man that once he recovers, he's going back to work moving those strange weapons and will make enough money for the both of them. The old man reminds Wade that he could have lived in the inner district with the other craftsmen, but Wade refuses to leave the old man behind. He explains that when Golden Wheat City was under attack, the old man helped him, and without that assistance, Wade believes he would have died. Wade then tells his old friend that he heard the prince is recruiting people for public security and plans to give it a shot when the time comes. The scene shifts to a boat sailing through the sea, carrying witches en route to Border Town. Inside, they're enjoying a meal, enhanced by seasonings like salt and peppers. A blonde witch relishes the taste and playfully teases Ash, suggesting she's probably forgotten what good food tastes like after living in Border Town. As expected, Ash gets annoyed, and the two get into an argument, Ash defending Border Town and its food, while the blonde witch mocks it. Just as their banter escalates, they hear noises from outside. A crew member informs them that multiple monsters are approaching. Princess Tilly gets anxious when she hears about the monsters and asks if they're demons. Once outside, they encounter hybrid fish monsters with legs. The blonde witch materializes a weapon and challenges Ash to a competition. Whoever kills more monsters will be considered stronger. But Ash seems uninterested and just brushes off the challenge, but they both prepare for battle. Tilly uses her magic stone to fly and gets a better view from above. She notices that these monsters are different from the ones they faced before. As a fish monster tries to attack a man, Ash quickly jumps in and demolishes it with a single swing of her sword. The man trembles at her sheer power. Another monster appears behind Ash, and the blonde witch quickly tells her sternly to pay attention. Ash once again calmly swings her sword again, slicing the monster in half with one stroke. She tells her friend not to worry about her, as she can handle herself. The other witch tells her friend to keep their guard up instead of squabbling. With that, Ash starts slashing down monsters left and right with incredible speed, so fast it's almost hard to keep up with. Meanwhile, Tilly notices that the ship is shaking. These fish monsters definitely couldn't be causing it, and she starts to worry that the tremors feel like huge monsters hitting the ship from underneath. If the shaking continues, their ship might be torn apart. Suddenly, the entire ship begins to shake violently, and everyone standing on it starts losing their balance. Tilly shouts that there's a big guy under the water, and it's probably trying to flip the ship. The ponytail witch decides to take action. Since the monster is hugging the ship's hull, she thinks she might be able to put up a shield to block its attacks. The ship's captain chimes in, saying that if it's as huge as Miss Tilly described, normal attacks might not be effective. He's unsure how they're supposed to fight a monster that big and massive. Just then, the blonde witch, who goes by the name Andrea, steps in and confidently tells everyone to leave it to her, because no one can match her shots. But they don't have much time, as the monster is already charging at them from behind. The ponytail witch quickly leaps into the air, using her magic to shield the ship from a giant attack. However, the effort takes a serious toll on her, and she starts coughing up blood, quickly falling down. Ash manages to push her back to safety with the rope that was tied to her. That is when Andrea jumps into the air and conjures a golden bow. She shoots an arrow that takes down the monster with a single hit. Ash is momentarily thrilled to see this, but her joy quickly fades when Andrea collapses into the water and begins to drown. Even though Ash always has beef with Andrea, she dives into the water to rescue her friend. The other witches are relieved because they won't have to swim to reach Border Town now. Tilly's glad they got out safely, but her confidence takes a hit when she sees the snow starting to fall. Early snow isn't exactly a good omen. The royal scholars once said that an early winter at Greycastle means demons are on their way, which means that the months of demons have begun. She mentions that it's still autumn and wonders if the Border Town is already under attack. As they approach solid land, the princess asks if this is where the witches got off last time. The captain nods, saying he remembers this spot because last time the Border Town had a giant balloon for transport. Tilly's pretty surprised to hear about the balloon, and Ash explains it flies with hot air and that Roland is the one who used the logic of hot air to make it happen. That's when Tilly realizes the royal scholars never taught them anything about this stuff, so she has no clue from where he picked up this knowledge. Whatever is the case, they will have to wait for the answers until they finally meet him, so she just tells everyone to reach the shore. Tilly then turns to the captain and asks him if he could stay here for 3 or 4 days, since she wants to send Lotus and the other witches back to the island. The captain agrees, saying he'd never dare to sail the dangerous sea without any of the witches. Once they finally make it to the solid ground, Tilly tells Shavi, the ponytail witch, to give the other witches a lift. Shavi uses her barrier abilities to create floating platforms for them, while Tilly just flies on her own with the help of her magic stone. Back at the border town, workers are struggling with the heavy snowstorm making their job tough. Meanwhile, Tilly and her crew arrive at the town and start walking across the bridge the prince built. They're absolutely blown away by the size of the bridge and can't help but wonder how much metal it took to build something so massive. Ash comments that the giant bridge seems like a waste of resources, because she thinks a pontoon would have been enough and wonders if there's really any business beyond the river's origin. Andrea chuckles at her remark, calling it foolish. She explains that even though she's not from Grey Castle, she can see the value in the forests and uninhabited lands for territory expansion. A pontoon wouldn't handle the river's increased traffic, so a giant bridge makes more sense. Andrea adds that the prince must be smarter than everyone else here. Ash then points out how Andrea was trying to shame the prince not too long ago. As they approach the town, soldiers quickly stop them, questioning why they're coming from the south. One of the soldiers spots that they're witches, and Tilly proudly confirms it. The soldier happily tells them to wait there while he reports back to the castle that new witches want to join the witch union. Ash tries to explain Tilly's status, but the princess quickly stops her, telling the soldier that they will wait. Ash asks why they didn't just let the guards know their true identity. Tilly explains that she's curious about how the prince would react to a witch from an unknown origin. Just then, Nightingale appears, cheekily remarking that she heard there was a new witch, but didn't expect to see some familiar faces. Ash and Nightingale start catching up, while Tilly is absolutely amazed to see Nightingale. There's no doubt she's a combat-type witch and incredibly powerful. Nightingale then introduces herself to the princess and bows her head in respect, which takes Tilly by surprise. Once they make their way into the castle, Sylvie is absolutely thrilled to see Princess Tilly after a long time. She quickly hugs her, asking why she's here since it's still just autumn. Tilly reminds her that it's pretty much winter now. Princess then asks about the other witches, and Sylvie promptly updates her that Lotus is building houses for refugees. Evelyn and Candle should still be in the industrial district, and Honey is training messenger animals in the garden. The prince has already sent word for them to visit the castle. Right at that moment, Prince Roland walks in and tells Tilly that the other witches are on their way to the castle, as he has already informed them about her arrival. He then extends his hand and officially welcomes his dear sister to the border town. After a while, the siblings sit down for tea. Tilly reminds her brother that it's been a full year since they last met, and that they have a lot to discuss. Her brother agrees, saying he does have a lot to say, but he's not in a rush since winter will be long this year. Tilly keeps a close eye on him, and he starts to feel a bit nervous under her gaze. He calls out to Nightingale, who promptly appears. He tells her she doesn't have to hide since she's her sister, and asks her to leave the room. Once Nightingale is gone, the prince reassures his sister that they're alone. With that, Tilly's first question is to ask who he is exactly. The prince replies that he is her brother, the fourth prince of Grey Castle. Looks like I will have to wrap this episode here, but I'm really interested to see when they're both going to share their knowledge of the ruins and piece everything together. Besides, they still have to rescue that witch stuck in the misty forest ruins, and I'm dying to hear more about these devils.